Eat human.
Les humains à leur meilleur.
C'est tu apogeo.
ピーク人間
Today we have a rare in-studio podcast with Mikhaila Peterson. You may have seen her on the news or in articles where she's being attacked. Her and her dad, Jordan Peterson, eat an all-meat diet, which the mainstream media and doctors seem to have a giant problem with. This is just her story, and yes, she has specific problems, but I think there's value in hearing this and considering an elimination diet to see how you feel. You can always add back in food slowly. You never know if you could be on a whole new plane of existence and feel that much more amazing if you eliminate foods that could be giving you problems. Also, I should say that I have no problem with the carnivore diet, but believe it should be done from a more nose-to-tail approach. At least get some liver and bone broth in the mix. Just my 2 cents. Mikhaila came into the studio to film for a little segment of the Food Lies film. We did a relatively short podcast and then did some film-specific stuff. Please support the Food Lies film by pre-ordering on Indiegogo. It's the only way this film or even this podcast is possible. I'm keeping this ad-free because as a podcast listener myself, I hate to interrupt good content with ads. So please know that pre-ordering the film and or getting the Eat Meat t-shirt is a way of supporting us. Thanks, and here she is. Mikhaila, thanks for coming in. You're my first video live podcast.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and I know you're here for Joe Rogan tomorrow, which is a reoccurring theme. I got Sean Baker here when he was filming with Joe Rogan.
Yeah, so, I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited for you. So to jump straight in, people don't think of diet when they think of diseases like rheumatoid arthritis or depression, or people think of diet, they're like, okay, diabetes and heart disease and obesity, that's all that matters. But it seems like it's the first thing we should look at when we look at all these chronic diseases that humans didn't have before, right? So what is your story?
Well, I'll give you a bit of a background to start. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, when I was 7. I had 32 joints affected, and it was so severe rheumatoid arthritis. And then my health kind of got worse and worse. I was diagnosed with severe depression in grade 5 and put on antidepressants. So at that point, I was on immune suppressants for the arthritis and antidepressants for the depression. And then things kind of escalated. I started getting other symptoms, like when I was 14, I started getting this whole body itch, which should have looked like an allergic reaction, but I didn't have hives or anything, so I was just itchy, and doctors were like, whatever, some people are itchy. So when I was 17, the arthritis got so bad, even with the immune suppressants, that I needed to get my hip and ankle replaced. Then at 9, then there's fatigue. So I had chronic fatigue starting kind of when I was 14 when I got itchy, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And by the time I was 20, I was sleeping 16 or 17 or 18 hours a day, depending on the day, which coincided with when I went to university and started surviving off of like noodles and beer, like suddenly. And my parents my mom especially was like typically healthy. So we never had white bread. It was always like whole grain bread, and she didn't have sugar. We weren't allowed to have like candy. So she tried to figure out what was healthy for us. So I went from that kind of normal, like healthy version of the American diet to eating like pizza and beer. And so then my fatigue got way worse, and I was eventually diagnosed with idiopathic hypersomnia. My arthritis diagnosis changed to, instead of juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, to juvenile idiopathic arthritis. So by my like early 20s, I ended up with a whole bunch of like idiopathic diseases, and I was on 6 or 7 medications. I was taking antibiotics, I was taking Adderall to stay awake, like ridiculous dosages of Adderall, then immune suppressants, antidepressants, Tylenol 3 for the like breakthrough arthritic pain, and then I gained a bunch of weight. So it just like all my health, they just got worse and worse and worse, even though I was taking more and more medication. And I never considered diet as a factor because we talked to doctors and they'd basically, my mom, when I was a kid, said, well, is it possible? Because she was a very open individual. Is it possible that Mikhaila's having a flare up from oranges? Because oranges make me flare up. And mom got laughed at. And Dad was very scientifically oriented, so there wasn't enough evidence out there to conclude that diet had anything to do with it. So I never looked into it. But then I started getting this rash, and that was like the last thing I could mentally handle because I already had all these symptoms, and then there was something visible, and I was like, I can't be sicker than I already am. So I started Googling, and just for like 2 years, I just Googled pictures of like horrible skin rashes. And I finally came across the rash I had, and it was a gluten-associated rash. And then I was looking into celiac disease and thought, oh my God, I had my genes tested. I have the gene for celiac disease. It's like celiac disease commonly couples with other autoimmune disorders. Like, why wasn't I tested for this in the medical community? So I immediately cut out gluten, and things got like 10 or 15% better. So I didn't see like a huge recovery, but I was really set on, I saw that gluten like damages your gut, and that's especially for people with celiac disease, but there seemed to be a lot of evidence that for everybody it wasn't good. I was like, well, that's weird. Why aren't people told this if the evidence is out there? So I kind of stayed on that train for a while, and then I went and started an elimination diet, and I had no idea what I was doing because I didn't know anything about food, and I'd heard of a paleo diet, but I'd never taken anything seriously. So I cut down to what I thought were like foods that no one was allergic to. So I kept rice, which was a problem, but I kept rice because like everyone can eat rice. I kept meat, and I kept like green vegetables and sweet potatoes and like coconut oil and olive oil, just stuff like that. And after the first month, like my skin healed and my arthritis went away. And that was still eating rice. But because I'd dramatically reduced everything else, like fruit, dairy, soy, all those things went out, I got way better, especially my skin. And I was like, okay, this is good. That's weird. So I tried to reintroduce things and had these horrible autoimmune responses to like everything I was trying to reintroduce. And I went to doctors to try and explain, but they were like, well, have you had your allergies tested? And they just do that like skin prick test, which is an IgE allergy. It's an instant reaction. And I have allergies to like outdoor things and to nuts, but I don't have allergies to other foods. So nothing was showing up. And I was saying, well, I'm getting itchy. Like I had sugar because I thought nobody's allergic to sugar. And I had this like whole body itch came back. I was like, well, I'm having an allergic reaction. Like what's going on? But nothing was showing up in my blood work. And my doctor thought I was kind of crazy, me coming in being like, I'm arthritic again. Now it's gone. Or like, I'm itchy again. Now it's gone. And nothing was visible. Anyway, I kind of cycled through that. I learned a lot more about paleo diets, elimination diets, eventually ketogenic diet, and basically cut more and more things out. And I knew the baseline of foods that I didn't react to, and it was basically the autoimmune protocol, which I hadn't heard of before, but it was basically that, like surprisingly close. It's a diet that I don't know who came up with it, but it's basically like green vegetables, sweet potatoes, like very low sugar fruit, coconut oil, like it's just really inert foods almost. And meat, of course meat. They get rid of dairy, they get rid of most fruit, they get rid of nightshades, they get rid of grains, like anything that kind of irritates people. And so I came up with a list of foods that was really comparable to that protocol. So I thought, okay, well, there's obviously something behind this.
That's cool. On your own. I like it.
Yeah, through just horrible trial and error. It was like these food reactions were unbelievable because at that point I stopped taking my medications. So I was trying to monitor my health symptoms. And every time I reintroduced a food, I'd have this autoimmune flare up with the depression coming back. And it was unbelievably awful. And I was Googling it, trying to find other people like me. So I was like, this is so bad. How can this not be medically documented? And I did find some case studies of people with celiac disease who were also like extremely mentally ill. And when they reintroduced gluten, their mental illness would spike. So there were case studies like that, which kind of fit along with what I was experiencing. But that was it. It was only for gluten. Like I had one of these responses to soy. I tried to reintroduce like just a pile of soy. That was one of my first reintroductions. Because this was when I thought soy was a health food. Because of everything
Many
you're
people
told.
still do.
Yeah. So I was like, well, soy, it was all organic. And I was like, I made my own miso soup and I had tofu and edamame beans. And I had this horrible response like people with celiac disease were having to gluten. And I was like, but no one's recorded this? Like, what's going on? Am I insane? So I did that for like off and on for a year, which was extremely unpleasant, but I still had that hope because it was like it would flare, but then it would go away and I'd be better again, and then it would flare. So then I kind of got everything under control and decided, screw reintroducing foods. I'll just stick with this limited amount of food. It's better than having these horrible reactions. And then I got pregnant, and then everything flared up again. And I was just like stuck like that. Even though the list of foods I had created had previously been safe, they started not being safe. And so that was extremely frustrating. So
That's interesting because pregnancy screws with your hormones, right? And a lot of people realize that what you eat is very related to your hormones.
it not only does it screw with your hormones, and it definitely screws with your hormones, but your microbiome also changes when you're pregnant. So it turns out when you're pregnant, and this is documented, your microbiome gets less diverse. So I think, so that was definitely a problem. And during pregnancy, lots of people have these symptoms that I had equated with food intolerances. Like they'll get itchy legs, or they'll get skin breakouts, or they'll get nauseous, like they'll get anxiety is like really common during pregnancy. And I don't know, but I don't think that that's we're not supposed to have evolved that way. Yeah. Like I think that's because people get sensitive. Lots of people become lactose intolerant during their pregnancy. So I'd read all that and I was like, well, now I'm reacting to everything. So I had my daughter. I thought maybe it's hormones. Maybe this is just normal for pregnancy, and pregnancy is miserable because some people say it's miserable. So I had my daughter and then it didn't go away. And I was like, well, maybe this is postpartum depression. Maybe this is still normal. But it didn't go away, and I was still getting these like itching periods and being mildly arthritic. And so about 4 months after she was born, out of like desperation and frustration, I cut out the vegetables because I was eating at that point meat and salad. So I'd cut down all the fruit. I'd cut down everything to meat and salad, and I was still reacting. And I knew it wasn't the meat, so I could tell just how I felt after I eat. I was like, nobody's allergic to beef, really. So I cut that down and then transitioned over to just eating meat. And eventually, like it took a bit of time, especially through the transition period, but my symptoms went away. So initially, the low carb diet really helped me. And then I just got, the more I cut out to going to just meat, the better I got. And yeah.
That's interesting. So even the salad, I understand that even just cutting out just a little bit of greens made a big difference.
So I listened to Sean Baker on Joe Rogan, and I thought, and this is when I was just eating beef and salad. And by salad, I mean olive oil, apple cider vinegar, salt, pepper, and lettuce. There was no, like, it wasn't a salad.
Yeah.
There was hardly anything there. But I heard him on Joe Rogan, and I thought, well, that's interesting. First of all, I didn't know people could just survive off of meat. So that's good to know. But the other thing I thought was, okay, maybe the reason the meat diet works for people is because they just coincidentally cut out everything that they shouldn't be eating anyway. Like, even if you go vegan, sometimes you get rid of processed foods, you get rid of sugar, and that makes you feel better. So I thought that was kind of what was happening for this carnivore diet. But I was also knew I was reacting to the salad, so I decided to give it a try anyway and go down to just meat. And it worked. And then I thought, well, nobody's allergic to olives. This was when I was still trying to reintroduce, right? So I tried to reintroduce organic olives in like olive oil. There's nothing to them except for olives. And I had this immune response. So it's like got itchy, and then I got depressed, and then my skin broke out. And then I got arthritic. I got lower back pain. And that happened over a period of a couple weeks. And it was minor in comparison to like the soy reintroduction, but it was still there. And it was like, if I can't eat olives, what else am I going to reintroduce? It was like the safest food I could think of. Lettuce, I was reacting to. Olives. It was like pepper at one point. So yeah, I've just been doing beef, salt, and water since 9 months?
That's so interesting because most people start with this carnivore thing because they see Sean Baker post about it, but you kind of just did it on your own.
Yeah, out of like desperation.
Yeah.
Just interesting how people are coming to that conclusion.
Yeah. So we'll back up because what were these doctors saying, especially when you're as young as 7? It's so interesting to me that no one asked about your diet, it sounds like. They were just trying to prescribe you things.
Yeah, and it wasn't because there was some like conspiracy behind it. I think they're also brainwashed, right? So you would think like now that I know how much food had an impact on me, you would assume that the first mode of treatment would be lifestyle, including diet. But I think people are so sick now. Some people are so sick that it's just like, oh, well, a food couldn't cause something that dramatically bad. Like it was like my joints disintegrated.
Mm-hmm.
How on earth can we link that back to food? So I think people are just confused, but diet was never mentioned once. And I went to naturopaths a couple of times and they all said, go gluten-free. But I was like, oh, gluten-free, that's a fad.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that too. I thought for a while before, I'm just like, oh yeah, whatever. I always thought that it's just because, oh yeah, you're cutting out grains. It's a whole low carb thing. Why it works is you're just doing low carb, which is good for everyone, it seems.
I didn't even know low carb was good for people. I had no background somehow. I don't know. There was no scientific evidence, and I was very like, scientific evidence isn't there, so I'm not going to trust it.
Yeah.
But then I got real desperate.
So then what were you eating as a kid? Like how did that, you actually had a hip replaced and an ankle replaced?
Yeah. So my left ankle and my right hip.
How does that even work? It's an autoimmune disease.
Yeah. So it was juvenile idiopathic arthritis. I never had any of the blood markers for rheumatoid arthritis. So it was just unknown reason, but you have severe arthritis. And the immune suppressants did initially help. Like I went from being in pain and not being able to walk very well to being able to run around. But then when I was like 16, suddenly my hip and ankle had no cartilage left in them. And there wasn't really much swelling or much pain, but it was like they just wore down. And then they told me when I was 16, oh, your hip is in really bad shape. You're going to need a hip replacement when you're 30. And then my hip went from needing a hip replacement when I'm 30 to needing a hip replacement now in 8 months.
What were you eating back then? Like the normal kid stuff? Like
Well, so I ate a lot of noodles as a kid. I really liked, it was just like, it's basically instant noodles. So but we didn't eat like, that's not all I survived off of. I had meat like every night.
Okay.
In the morning I had like eggs and cheese and toast, right? And then for lunch I probably had a sandwich. So I think with the celiac gene, it really probably wasn't good for me, but I never had stomach pain or anything. So it was pretty standard. It wasn't like I didn't survive off of candy or anything. It was pretty standard. I drank a lot of milk. And then when I was a teenager, I had a lot of soy. I really liked Japanese food, so I went out for Japanese food whenever I could. But it really wasn't an abnormal diet. I don't know what happened.
Interesting. So this is, your story. I mean, you have specific things going wrong, and so this is not the case with everyone. But it seems, well, for one, it's representative of a lot of people, I understand, right? Have you been collecting people's stories?
Yeah. So I started the blog when I was pregnant, when I was trying to figure out what was going on, because I hadn't been able to find any information online. And I thought, okay, if there's like one other person out there who's experiencing these horrible reactions, then they should know that they're not alone. So I started this blog, and since then, I've had like hundreds of people contact me, ranging from like a lot of people are kind of overweight and anxious. Like that's really common. And then there are some people, rarely, who are as sick as I was. So they exist too, but a range from anywhere to people as sick as me to, I'm 35 and why am I carrying around like 30 extra pounds and I have anxiety and brain fog and what am I doing wrong? And that's pretty standard.
Yeah.
Like I haven't really seen anybody hit 50 without experiencing a negative side effect if they're just eating a standard diet. Like you can be a really healthy person, but even if you're as healthy as you can be on the regular diet, you're not going to get past middle age without being affected by it. It's just for people who are more sensitive, it hits them when they're younger.
Yeah, and people don't realize, a lot of people in their mid-30s, they think they're doing fine. Or even younger people, they talk to me, they're like, oh yeah, I can eat pasta all day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, just wait a little bit or you don't look great.
Well, I think part of the problem is if you've slowly gotten worse, like over your entire life, then that's the norm.
Yeah, you don't really realize it.
No, and you don't realize like everybody gets tired around 3 p.m. It's the afternoon crash, right? It's because you've been working hard all day, except it's not. You're not supposed to crash at 3 p.m. So I think if people experience this for so long, they forget or they don't even know that that's not normal because it is normal now.
It's the new normal. Well, it's normal to be, like 10, 15 pounds overweight.
Yeah, at least.
At least, yeah.
At least.
Yeah. That's why I'm making this film. But
Yeah.
trying to spread the word about this stuff. But talking about the depression and anxiety part, because that's new. I'm looking into a lot of this brain health stuff now. And yeah, we're finding that your diet affects like Alzheimer's and like type 3 diabetes, they're calling it. And I didn't really know much about, depression, anxiety part till recently. So you found that, and other people you've talked to have found that.
Yeah. So unfortunately, it seems like the depression, especially if it's like severe depression, that seems hardest to control with diet. So it's not impossible to control. It's just the most sensitively triggered.
Mm-hmm.
So even people with autoimmune disorders, like they eat something wrong, they'll get a flare up. But getting a flare up that's like pain like that is less severe than the mental stuff. At least that's how it's been for me.
Mm-hmm.
And people I've spoken with are just triggered more easily. So it's like you have to be more strict with the diet. Like some people can get away with cheating every now and then they're like, oh, well, I feel sluggish for a couple of days, but then I'm back. But the anxiety, if you're prone to negative emotion like that, it seems like you have to be a lot stricter. So I've had great success with myself, with my dad, with people who have contacted me, but they have to be strict. It's not one of those like you have a cheat meal every Sunday type thing, and then your crippling anxiety goes away. And so it's trickier. But it's mine's gone now. And I'd been on antidepressants for 12 years.
And then you're off them.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. People look at me like I'm crazy. Like if I even mention that they should change their diet and it could cure that or help. Well, you mentioned your dad. So your dad's Jordan Peterson, right? He's traveling around. He's a speaker, author, all that. And he talked about it publicly. What's his story? What's a little recap?
Well, so we have this familial depression. We thought it was some brain chemistry problem that just ran in our family. So he's been suffering from that for probably forever, but it got more severe in his 30s. And then he started taking antidepressants in his late 30s. And that's part of the reason my depression was identified so early. Mm-hmm. So, which I'm thankful for, because being unmedicated without changing my diet would have been miserable. And then he was always really slim, and then he started gaining weight again, like around middle age. And he cut out like desserts or sugar, and nothing was really helping. And then he started getting tired, so he'd nap every day, like a couple of hours every day. He'd have a difficulty waking up. And then those were most of his symptoms, but the main one was this horrible depression, which makes you like really volatile and just, it's like living in a bubble of hell. Like it's horrible. So when I started to get better from playing around with diet and my fatigue went away, he really saw that change in me, because I went from sleeping all the time to being awake, which is a huge difference if that hasn't happened before. And then my depression lifted, and I said, Dad, this has something to do with food. You have to get on this. And I had lost weight at that point from the diet too, and said, so we took a before, because I knew something was going to change. So I took like a before picture and before weight and everything. And then he started on this kind of food exploration journey with me, very grudgingly. It was very difficult to convince him to do it, because he didn't want to, and he didn't believe any of it. But he did, because he saw the change in me. And his story is a little weirder. Like his physical symptoms got better really quickly. So he lost like 50 pounds in the first year, and he stopped snoring. He had a patch of psoriasis kind of on his foot that went away. He had mouth ulcers that went away. He had GERD that went away. He had a whole bunch of physical symptoms. The small ones that, like, not compared to joints deteriorating, but still serious health problems. And all that cleared up. But because of this, because the anxiety seems more difficult to get rid of, it took a while to figure that out. So that actually didn't really see a big recovery until he went down to beef, salt, and water. So he was on this low carb diet, and then he went to this meat and salad diet, and he got healthier and healthier looking, but psychologically it was still, the anxiety was, it changed into something that was like almost harder to live with. It's hard to explain. But he switched over to just beef, and he started feeling better in a week.
Wow.
So it worked for him faster than when I went on it.
It's so interesting. Do people try to say that it's placebo effect or it's all in your head or something like that?
Yeah. Which is fine. Like, it's weird. You'd think that if they were talking to me, they would say, maybe you weren't depressed before. They'd take the psychological part.
Mm-hmm.
But instead they go, well, maybe you're just thinking your arthritis away. And it's like, I had joints replaced. This isn't my wrists are sore and now they're not sore.
Yeah.
So yeah, mostly I've gotten, this is a placebo effect because the placebo effect can be very strong.
Mm-hmm. Well, it can, but that's, okay, keep going.
I don't know if it can solve your joint problems like that strong.
Yeah.
And then the most recent one was maybe you're feeling better. And I've got this before. It's not even from one place, but maybe you're feeling better because now you have a sense of control over your life because of the eliminations of food. So because you feel deprived, you're feeling better, which is funny because I don't feel deprived. So that's, placebo, deprivation. Maybe I have an eating disorder, although I don't know how that would get rid of an autoimmune disorder either.
Well, vegan seems like an eating disorder to me. That's just a well-accepted eating disorder.
That's much more. I have a hard time picking on vegans because a lot of the people I've talked to are just trying to figure things out and are so brainwashed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's so much confusing information out there. And I had a really bad reaction to dairy. I know the carnivore diet is popular for all animal products, but dairy was really bad for my arthritis. It wasn't as bad as grains, but it was up there. So I can kind of see how if you go vegan, it's going to make your life harder, right? But if you get rid of the processed foods and the sugar, maybe you're soy-free, maybe you're grain-free. I don't really know what you'd be eating, but I can see how that could help.
Definitely.
I mean, it's different when you bring in all the dogma associated with it, and then that complicates things.
Well, yeah, we're trying to clear some of that up in the film.
Yeah.
And I think you said once that vegan diet eliminates cow suffering, but the meat diet eliminates human suffering.
Yeah. I don't know. I've had people ask me what I'm concerned about. And I get my meat from Mennonites. So I am concerned about factory farming and things, but not compared to suffering from an autoimmune disorder or, man, spending all day on a treadmill trying to lose weight and being told you're lazy when literally it's your diet. That's not your fault. So I'm much more concerned about, people suffering than cow suffering.
Yeah. And I mean, the cow thing is not that bad. Vegans just try to find the most extreme cases. And I just was at a farm watching how these cows are grown, and it's amazing. And all the animals, it didn't smell bad at all. We went to Joel Salatin's farm. Zero smell. We were in the pig pen. Zero smell. They were happy. Kids were playing with them. We were in the chicken coop. Kids were throwing. It's the opposite of what the vegans talk about. I mean, there's certain cases, maybe there's confined feeding operations that could be bad. But a lot of cows are doing really well, and they spend a lot of their life on pasture, no matter what, even if they go to the feedlot later. But I feel like there's a lot of people attacking you and your dad. Specifically, I read an article from a prominent news source that called you and your dad out, and Sean Baker, and they said that it's totally ill-advised. It lacked vitamin C and folate.
Oh, God, that one.
Yeah, she kept going back to vitamin C. I mean, Baker talks about this. We only need a lot of vitamin C because of our poor diet, right? If you're eating just meat and healthy things, you actually don't need much vitamin C at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually had my vitamins tested. And I don't really trust blood work because I was dying and nothing really showed up on my blood work. I was low. I've always been low in zinc and vitamin D3 since I was a kid. So that's what showed up in my blood work. Literally nothing else.
Before, when you were sick.
When I was sick,
right.
Yeah. And then I got so then I didn't do testing for a while. And then I tested when I went down to low carb. And when I went down to low carb, my zinc and vitamin D were still low. And my B vitamins were low. And I don't think that had anything to do with diet. I think that was because I hadn't tested in 6 or 7 years. So I think I was just heading downhill.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly, since switching over to the beef diet, zinc and vitamin D are still low, which I'm not surprised about. I haven't been on the diet for very long, but all my Bs have recovered. And so that's interesting. But vitamin C, all that stuff, that's never been low, and it's not low now. Folate, calcium, the ones people are worried about, those are absolutely fine. So yeah, you only need the vitamin C if you're trying to process large quantities of glucose all the time.
Yeah. I don't know what these people's problems are. I guess we're attacking, it's like certain nutritionists or dietitians were going against all that they've been taught. So I guess they have to publicly go against you, or the media. It's because it seems unconventional, or we're just in this plant-based world right now. Is that what it is?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. One, they're already used to attacking dad. So they're like, well, we can just attack him some more. But I can also kind of understand where people are coming from. Like, I know before I got into diet, I was there's no science behind this. I really thought gluten-free was a fad. I thought, there's no evidence organic food is better for you. Like, so I wouldn't have been like nasty to people trying diet out, but I would have scoffed at them. So these articles don't particularly make me angry because I can see myself, and that was wrong. I was wrong. And my world got turned like upside down to show me that I was wrong. But I can't really blame them after everything they've been told for like their entire lives.
Yeah. I mean, I guess so. It's a confusing, nutrition's impossible to figure out.
It seems like it. We've been very confused in the last, even just the last 100 years.
Yeah.
It's too bad.
Yeah, I'm on a mission to try to make some sense of it.
Yeah, well, I hope it helps.
I think I got something.
It might.
So, in your daily life, so just talk about that for a second. You just eat ribeye. Is that it?
No. So I was initially, because I like ribeyes the best. But I'm also getting like antibiotic-free ribeye, which is expensive, and at least in Toronto, it's expensive. So I started switching over, and now I'm eating a variety of beef. So I'll have, I can buy lean. This is something I just discovered. It's exciting. I get excitement where I can get it. But I'll get like super lean cuts, which are really cheap, and put them in the slow cooker and add tallow. And so that's literally just beef, tallow, salt, and a bit of water. And it's delicious because of the added fat. And it's way cheaper than eating ribeye. So I'll do that in the slow cooker. I eat a lot of ribs. I'll eat roasts, and I'll eat steak. It depends on the day. And I think I'm eating about 2.5 pounds. It depends on the day. If I do more, I'll eat more. But I'm eating about 2.5 pounds a day. And I get about 80% of my calories from fat. So I'm in a really high state of ketosis constantly. And I haven't dropped out of it since the diet.
So people think it gets boring, though. Does it get boring for you?
No. The first switching over initially, it got boring on day, I don't know, maybe a weekend. And I was like, okay, I'm not very hungry anymore. I don't really want to eat this. But the repercussions were bad enough that I didn't have a choice. But that's just the transition period. So because you basically withdraw from carbs, things get more tasteless, and you get kind of irritable and you withdraw. So yeah, the first month can kind of suck, especially if you switch over from a standard diet to a meat diet. Then you go through some serious carb withdrawal. But then once you transition over, I'm not bored at all, ever. I never crave anything. I never feel that physical full feeling after I eat. And I was still getting that when I was eating salad, really. But I don't get that. There's no downside. And I've talked to a lot of people who I put them in the category of healthy people. So maybe they have minor anxiety. And that's pretty good nowadays. And I haven't talked to anyone who's switched over to the meat diet that switched back, even if they're considered healthy. So
it's a good sign.
It's a really good sign. It's really surprising. It's most of them have felt so much better that they said it's not worth going back. Plus the cravings go away after the first month-ish. So there's no yearn to go back.
Yeah, well, so I'm carnivore adjacent, I guess you could say, for a while. And then I tried just beef, just full meat eating for a week just to see what was up, even though I feel perfectly fine. And my cravings for anything else went away after a day and a half.
Oh my God.
I wasn't even thinking, usually I make this chocolate out of just pure cacao and coconut oil. And you have to keep it in the fridge or it'll melt. And I would eat, and some stevia. And I would eat that a lot after meals. And I didn't even want to eat it after I was just eating an all meat diet.
Wow.
I didn't even care about that. And that week, for some reason, my energy was increased. I played basketball for 2 hours every Tuesday. And so this is the second time where I've had more energy in these 2-hour basketball sessions than when I was eating, say, 80% meat and some spinach and onions and mushrooms.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I was trying to figure out why. Maybe I was thinking I was even more fat adapted, where those little bit of carbs were keeping me in sort of some carb dependency for fuel. But then when I just went all meat, then it's just my body was just extra good at tapping into the fat.
I don't know. It's really hard to say. When I switched over, so this is weird. When I switched over, I went from I was eating 3 steaks a day with big salads. So I just dropped the salad. And it was like 5 ingredient salad, including the pepper as an ingredient. Like it wasn't much of a salad. And I still got salad cravings fairly severely after a week. And then I started getting bloated after I ate. So I had some sort of microbiome switch, I think. That all normalized after about a month, maybe a little bit more than a month. And then I adapted to it. But my adaptation took longer, even though I was eating so much meat beforehand, just dropping the salad. So I think it was a microbiome switch coupled with, I don't think I was digesting fat as well as I should have. But I also had an autoimmune disorder and some serious health problems. So I find that the healthier the person is, the easier they have switching into this diet. And the sicker they are and the worse their diet is, the more difficult it is to switch over.
Well, that makes sense. Because, yeah, for 4 years, I've been low carb or like on a path to this.
Yeah.
So really and I'm healthy.
Yeah, and Dad went from, and his anxiety is severe, but other than that, he's pretty healthy. He went from eating meat and salad, and he's like 3 days. Took him 3 days, and he got better. But it took me 6 weeks to like struggle through it, even though we went from the same diet. So it depends on the person,
Every
I think.
person's different.
Yeah.
And then, microbiome is a huge topic that I don't think anyone understands it. I was just talking to Dr. Georgia Eid about it. Do you know? She's great. And she was saying, well, yes, the microbiomes are different, but we don't even know. There's less microbiota in someone who's eating, say, a ketogenic diet, but why is that a bad thing?
Yeah.
Right?
No, we don't know. We can't even plate most of the bacteria in ourselves. We don't know anything about them.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't even know. We don't know what it's supposed to look like, the microbiome. Like it's not as if carnivores don't have microbiomes, but we don't have carb digesting bacteria. But maybe that's not a bad thing. I mean, who knows why this makes people feel better? Maybe partly it's because those bacteria die. Like we're just missing so much information.
Yeah, we do know that it affects you a lot and it's connected to your brain.
Yeah.
And so it's likely that, you get rid of them and that's why people feel better.
Yeah, who knows? It'd be nice to have some serious, solid research done into this area.
I think we're getting there.
Yeah.
So back to what I was saying, you have an individual problem. And then there's people who have maybe slight problems. But what would you say just for the normal everyday person who's not having problems? I don't think everyone needs to be a carnivore, but do you have opinions on maybe people should try out an elimination diet and see what happens?
Well, I think it's really hard to tell what your baseline of health is until you get there. And so if you're healthy, you're lucky. And I've been to the other side and it's very unpleasant. And if you keep eating standard American diet, you'll get there. So don't do that. Like try and figure it out as soon as you can. And there's no harm in an elimination diet. So I think the gold standard of an elimination diet is this beef, salt, and water. Not everyone is going to jump into that. I can understand that. But getting rid of like going low carb, getting rid of like grains and sugar and processed food, cutting down on fruit even, getting rid of soy, dairy, I don't know, a bunch of things. If you take out as many variables as you can take out, then you can kind of test foods out one at a time on yourself. But even if you think you're thriving, how do you know if that's the only way you've been experiencing reality? I don't really know how to explain it, but it's worth looking into.
There's a whole new world out there. Yeah, I mean, even just cutting down on sugar and carbs, like not even doing this whole thing.
Yeah.
People get to a different plane of existence they didn't know. They're just like, wow, my cousins, like my brain just works better and I just feel better. And all she did was just, cut out sugar and grains. Yeah,
sugar and grains for sure. I usually tell people if you can't manage an elimination diet, I tell people sugar, grain, dairy, and try and get rid of soy. That seems like a lot to begin with, but like if you get rid of those things, you're going to see a huge difference. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a huge dairy person, but grains, Definitely. We've only been cultivating those for like maybe in some areas 20,000 years, more likely 10, and in some areas 2,000 years. And for some reason, we think we've adapted to eat them.
Mm-hmm. I don't believe in grains at all.
No.
I want to get rid of them. I want to take all the grain fields and put cows
there. Yeah.
It's the dream.
Yeah, that is the dream.
So I think it's funny. You're talking about an extreme diet, right? We're talking about eating only meat or only animal foods. And then the vegans, they're on an extreme. They're saying only eat plant foods. They're both extreme. And they both work for a lot of people, it seems. So I don't get why, well, I guess I do get, but why if you go 100% plant-based, you're this healthy hero. And if you go 100% meat-based, you're an insane psychopath, suicidal idiot.
I think it's just time. I think they've had a lot more time than this other diet has. It's also like, I don't know. There is less, if you don't take into account human suffering, then there is less animal suffering in the vegan diet. And that would be fine if it actually helped people. Mm-hmm. But if it's making people ill, then it's not a good option.
Yeah. Well, and you could make points to say that growing vegetables kills a lot of animals. It's not on purpose, and they're smaller animals.
Yeah.
Right? But so I guess vegans say, oh, I don't purposefully kill animals.
Yeah.
For consumption. But
yeah, there's a lot of propaganda around it.
So can you tell me about implementing this into your normal life? I mean, you're a mother now. A lot of people say it's too hard to do with a family, stuff like that.
It's easier. I find this is easier than the low-carb diet I was doing. It's much less complicated. Like grocery shopping takes no time. I just walk to the butcher section and then I leave. Mm-hmm. Cooking takes no time. Like I'm either slow cooking, so that takes... I'm actually writing a recipe book, which is going to be a really short book. But it's like prep time, 3 minutes, 3 to 15 minutes. Like a steak takes 15 minutes to fry. That's not more than most people spend making breakfast. And then it takes like 15 minutes to eat, right? It's actually very quick. Slow cooking doesn't take time. Sticking something into an oven, it doesn't take time. So it's way easier than actually preparing a dinner, because I used to like cook wide range of things and I used to bake. So I have that experience, and that takes way longer than this. Like the low carb diet, chopping vegetables and all that stuff took some time, but just switching over to meat has been just made my life easier.
I think it's extremely easy, and there's no even decisions.
Yeah.
You have to make, there's so many easy things. But then what about when you're outside the home? Because a lot of people can't just make their own food all the time.
Yeah. So it does get to be more of a pain then. If you're like a healthy person and you don't have these flare-ups from like minuscule amounts of food, I've seen a lot of success with people eating at fast food restaurants that just serve meat patties. Mm-hmm. So buying things like that. If I go out, I'll go to a steakhouse. And they can usually, I just tell them, like, don't put anything on the steak. I'm allergic to everything. You get used to ordering that way. It's awkward and annoying at first because we've been taught, like, eat everything on your plate. But I go to steakhouses.
What about, I feel like there's this unladylike aspect to eating a bunch of beef. Like, you go on a date or something and the woman, doesn't want to be, like, scarfing down a bunch of meat.
Yeah. That should definitely change. I never had a problem with that prior to this diet. So I was still like, I'd go out and have chicken wings. And I had friends that were like, oh, I won't even eat in front of a guy, which is obviously something's wrong there. But I think that's just anxiety. That should definitely be eliminated. But I think if more and more people come out and say, this is an okay thing to do, then other people will look at that and think, okay, I can do that too. Hopefully. Because yeah, that's definitely an anxious piece of social culture that could just go away.
I agree. I'm trying to bring up all these sort of myths and stuff. So another is fiber. People think you need fiber in your diet.
It looks like it's not true. Yeah. I mean, a whole bunch of what we've been told isn't true. And it's funny that there's so much like hell rising against this way of eating, considering you can eat meat and not die of scurvy. So obviously what we've been told is wrong. We're obviously missing some information. So the fact that people are up in arms against it is a little surprising. You'd think that they'd be more like, hey, that's weird. What are we not being told?
Yeah, let's look into this.
Let's look into this. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's tens of thousands of carnivores now, just Sean Baker pulling them all together. And they all say the same thing. There's no problem with fiber. You're not constipated. You're not, it's all good.
No, if anything, I'm more regular than I was. It seems like vegetables are actually causing the problem, which when you think about it, actually makes more sense than needing fiber. But yeah, that doesn't seem to be right. The vitamin C thing isn't right. A whole bunch of what we've been told is so wrong.
Yeah, it goes against evolution. It goes against logic. I don't understand. People sometimes. All right, so back to pregnancy. Are you familiar with Weston A. Price stuff? That's so interesting to me because they recommend a certain way of eating when you're pregnant, and it involves a lot of nutrient-dense animal products, right? All the different cultures he studied. Mm-hmm. I think there's something about the Inuit that they would recommend people to not eat plants during pregnancy.
Yeah. I read a paper, and it was from the 70s, and people went in and interviewed Inuit elders, and they were told to, not eat. So they ate like 99% animal products and occasionally berries and some green like vegetables. And they were told during pregnancy to avoid the vegetables, which is exactly how I felt during my pregnancy. But nowadays you're told eat a varied diet. Well, make sure you're not told that nowadays at all.
Definitely not.
No.
It's so interesting, though, that all these native populations figured it out on their own. And what's also interesting is if they eat like that just during pregnancy because they know they need those extra nutrients and you're supporting their life, I mean, why not just eat like that always?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
This thing is like, I want to eat, I think it's all about nutrient density, right? And that's what Weston A. Price kind of figured out. It's all about nutrient density and getting away just all the refined carbs and sugars and vegetable oils. All that does is dilute your food with extra energy or carbs that you don't need. So why don't we just always eat like you're pregnant and then you'll be extra healthy? And it seems like the healthiest populations did do that. Like certain African tribes that were 6.5 feet tall on average, he reported, or some of them were 7 feet tall, and all they were eating was liver.
Yeah.
They were just focusing on liver. I mean, there's famous Maasai with the blood and the milk and the meat, but a lot of it was liver focused too.
Yeah, I've been reading a book by Stephenson. So
he's the guy who went all
Stephenson
1 year.
and Anderson?
Yes.
Yeah, he actually went and lived with Inuit people for 5 years. And then he came back and was like, hey, I've survived on just meat. And this was in the 40s, right? And the medical community was like, no, you're lying. Like, obviously you've had vegetables. Where's the scurvy? It's exactly the same as what's going on now. So I've been reading what his experiences were. But the people he lived with ate animal products and that's it. They didn't eat milk, but they had eggs, rarely, but when they were available. And then they switched between, they mostly ate caribou. They had seal, whale, and it was basically like 80% fat. It was a lot of fat and meat. And they were thriving, like no teeth decay, healthy, skinny people. Mm-hmm. So that's a really cool book. But yeah, one of the things that was strange that I experienced during pregnancy is I only ever had morning sickness when I ate something I shouldn't have been eating, which totally evolutionarily makes sense. I'd eat something I wouldn't, that my body didn't like, and I'd throw it up. Because you're sensitive because you have like a being inside you.
Yeah.
So maybe morning sickness, like maybe that's not something people are supposed to have, right? Maybe that's something that's caused by how we're eating. Just people just say, no, that's a normal part of pregnancy.
Maybe all chronic diseases are something that people shouldn't have.
Yeah, maybe.
And that it's to do with diet. Yeah, and multiple people, pregnant women, have reached out to me from my Instagram posts about liver, or meat, or sardines.
Yeah, I really liked liver during pregnancy.
So they were saying...
That was weird because I don't like liver.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an acquired taste, but they're like, this is what I've been craving when I was pregnant or now. And I always write back, listen to your body. Mm-hmm. This is not unhealthy. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
We have the wrong message out there, and it's really dangerous for pregnant women to get the wrong message.
Yeah.
They're like trying to avoid it because they think it's bad for them.
Yeah, I know. At least I know in Germany, they've told people if you're pregnant, you can't follow a vegan diet.
That's good.
And when they've come out with that, they said it's not safe unless you're supplementing with a whole bunch of different supplements. So that's good, but that's just good. Germany.
Yeah, well, Germans are ahead of us in their meat consumption. They have meat vending machines.
They do?
Yeah.
Wow, that is ahead of us.
I'll show you a picture of it. It's awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, and good luck on Joe Rogan tomorrow.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is great.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Stay in touch on Instagram and Twitter by just searching for Food Lies. You'll easily find me. Really enjoying the reviews coming in on iTunes. Thank you for that. Let's share this message and make this movement happen. First step is supporting the film on Indiegogo, then we'll go from there. I really appreciate it. Stay happy and healthy, my friends.